Okay, so I'm going to talk about something which it's hard to be nuanced about, and it's hard to thread the needle of getting the point which I'm trying to make across. But we're going to see how I do. And that issue is identity politics, which is something that a lot of people have embraced, and they've embraced it for understandable reasons. I think the cliff notes of those reasons are institutions have disproportionately impacted certain communities, notably pretty much all people of color, disproportionately African American and Native American have had it the worst. Women have had a raw deal for the longest time. LGBTQ community, immigrants, like there's all these disenfranchised communities that became that way through, racist or discriminatory economic or governmental policies. And so in order to rectify, we need to uplift the voices which traditionally don't have that power. And it makes a lot of sense on the surface, and in general I agree. But I would argue that just the symbolic gesture of pushing forward voices from certain communities has been weaponized by the same ruling class, which instituted the programs that disproportionately impacted those communities that they're now claiming to help by pushing forward people from those communities. So I know that's pretty abstract, but I'm going to go into a bunch of specifics, which I think illustrate the point better. And so there's a guy by the name of Ritchie Torres who just won his congressional primary in New York's 15th district, and so he's probably going to Congress. And he's an interesting young guy in that he is a millennial. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's going to be one of the youngest members of Congress. He's of he's of African and Latino ancestry. I think he's an immigrant also. He's also part of the LGBTQ community. And so he checks all the boxes, not all of them, but he checks a lot of the boxes for communities which would have a better understanding of why discrimination and institutional racism and historic inequities need to be rectified. And so if we were to have a more egalitarian society where people had equal opportunity and people with the best ideas for those type of principles of actually helping people was to be in place, then there wouldn't be, however many hundreds of white men making the laws all across the country, as has been the case most of the time. But in the case of Ritchie, he actually also happens to be one of the biggest supporters of Israel. And so I'll put this clip in right now.
Hello, I'm Ritchie Torres. I am Afro-Latino, LGBTQ, millennial, progressive, and pro-Israel. And I'm pro-Israel not despite my progressivism, but because of it. The first time I ever traveled outside the United States was when I went to Israel. As a kid, I was too poor to travel abroad. And the most powerful experience was my trip to Jerusalem. It's known to be the holiest city in the world, home to people, the most devout people of Jewish and Christian and Muslim faith. And I was struck that even a city as religious as Jerusalem had an open house, an LGBT open house. And that to me spoke volumes about Israel's commitment to LGBTQ equality and visibility.
And so if people's concern is rectifying the inequities caused by discriminatory policies and actions to people on earth, supporting Israel would not be the thing to do, despite their, the nice things in Jerusalem for gay people. I would argue more important would be what's happening in Gaza, where 38% of the population is in poverty and 26% is unemployed. And it's the largest open-air prison in the world. And nobody can come in or out, and supplies are completely controlled by Israel. And they don't let enough food, so people on average are consuming 1,400 calories per day, and there's malnutrition everywhere. And the water isn't treated oftentimes, and Israel controls the water supply. And when there's protests, they'll snipe people, including journalists, and they'll shoot off people's arms. If they dare voice any, dissent, every 5 years or so, they'll bomb hospitals and schools and houses indiscriminately in the Gaza Strip, killing, 80% civilians, disproportionately children, around 500 children, both in 2008, then again in 2014. Not to mention what they're doing in the West Bank, where they're systematically taking away land and annexing it. And Netanyahu has said that he's planning on they might officially annex those parts of the West Bank soon, despite the claims previously that they were moving towards a peace process and that this wasn't part of the plan. But it really has been the plan the whole time. Netanyahu's son, just a little bit ago, a couple days ago, said that he thinks that all minorities should be banned from Tel Aviv. Like, so there's a discriminatory policy from you that you couldn't find in the U.S. Unless you went back to like the 50s, and it's happening in Israel. But not to worry, Israel is rebranded with a progressive young millennial, Afro-Latino immigrant gay man who supports Israel because of its progressive policies. And the public eats it up. Or I don't know if the public eats it up, but a lot of people buy into that more than should. And the media pushes it forward because fundamentally the media is a reflection of the dominant economic institutions within society, and they support Israel because of the development that's happening therein. And so Time Magazine might run a cover on him. Other institutions will support him. The Democratic Party, I guarantee you, is going to support him to a large degree. And they've effectively rebranded the policies which used to be instituted by old white men that are extremely discriminatory and awful for people. And now they're pushed by this new guy. And it's a great new thing. And if people view the world through that lens, which is a surface level lens, then it's gonna be hard to change. And so the powerful institutions, whether they're corporations or whether they're the government or the Democratic Party, has totally adopted this framework as that's what progress is. Progress is getting more a more diverse array of people making the same decisions, and then vague statements about whatever it is, identity politics. That doesn't fundamentally change anything. And they also use it cynically in select instances and at other times completely discard it. And so in the other New York primary, Elliot Engels lost to Jamal Bowman. So the old white man lost to the younger black man. But that didn't stop all the mainstream Democrats who cry about identity politics and getting more representation and how important it is that women like Nancy Pelosi are making decisions now. They endorsed Engels, the old white man, and the reason they endorsed him is because he's the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. He supports all the bombings. He supports all the industry. He supports the healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And the money keeps flowing in the right direction. And this time it happened to be from the old white man, so we have to defend him. And Bowman, who represented a threat to that system, not because he's black. They could have a Cory Booker doing the same things, and they'd have supported him. But because he supports Medicare for all and he supports ending the wars, because he represented an actual threat to specific policies and institutions, they tried to shut him down. So Hillary Clinton endorsed Engels, Cuomo endorsed Engels, I think Pelosi endorsed him. The whole establishment, it comes on the side of the old bad guy in this instance, in opposition to the minorities they prop forward in other instances, like Joe Biden right now saying he's only going to pick a woman of color. I'm sure he is going to pick a woman of color, but he's not going to pick Nina Turner, or he's not going to pick an actual progressive woman that cares about changing institutions. He's going to pick a Kamala Harris, or he's going to pick a Susanna Rice, or somebody like that who's already acclimated themselves to the institutions before and just has a different surface level exterior. And so I would argue, please do not buy into that too much. If the institutions change, then the representation changes. And so if black wealth was not 1/10 of white wealth, and black opportunity was the same as white opportunity, or same as women opportunity was the same as for men, then there would be naturally more people of those representations, or more gay people, whatever it is, in positions of power or government or whatever it is. And so that's the way to do it. It's not by just plucking, people from those communities and putting them in the same decision-making chairs as the other people, without fundamentally changing the life on the ground for people. It's easy for the powerful to do that. It co-ops, it destroys actual progress. It's much harder to make real change.